Question from the audience.
I'm Ed Thompson with the Ayn Rand Institute. I find Sir Malcolm's assertion that because they are Iraqis or Arabs, that there will be violence. I find that a racist statement. I feel compelled to point out, I'll get to that. I feel compelled to point out that it was the Iraqi troops that went into Bosnia to clean up the mess that was left behind by the British troops. Now, the question that I have is how the opposition can deny or ignore the evidence of the proponents that we're winning the war and state that Iraq will fall into disarray when the Americans leave, when Mr. Kagan states that Iraq will be it'll be a watershed situation, that Iraq will be a rival to Saudi Arabia because it's a democracy. Now, the question really is, what makes you think that, Sir Rifkind, what makes you think that Iraq will fall into violence as opposed to becoming a civilized country like some of the other Middle Eastern states, such as the US, UAE, Kuwait,
I'm going to cut you off because I think the question is clear. Sir Malcolm, I think the question, if I can...
I think you clearly misunderstood what I said, and that may have been my fault, and I'm sorry if you did. But at no time do I suggest that the Iraqis, as a people, as a culture, are any more prone to violence than anybody of any ethnic background. What I did say is that if you go into somebody else's country who has not attacked you, if you remove their government, and if you destroy their political system, then you create a political vacuum. And in the circumstances of Iraq, where rightly or wrongly, the Sunni minority had had power, not just under Saddam Hussein, for 100, 200 years, and the Shia majority suddenly see an opportunity to assert power, and the Sunnis, seeing that they are losing it, resist that, you then get effectively a civil war. And when you, as a result of having created this political vacuum, you give people like Al-Qaeda an opportunity to get in on the act, encouraging sectarian violence, helping mosques being blown up in order to get people to commit acts of revenge in return, then you get all the terrible trauma of what has happened in Iraq. Now, I do not say that that is the direct responsibility of the American or the British governments. Of course, they were not responsible for violence committed by Al-Qaeda or by Sunni or by Shia. What I do say is that that explosion of violence, which has led to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of terrible deaths, simply would not have happened if the foolish decision to go to war had not been taken in the first place.
Sir Malcolm,
and so
Fred Kagan,
ultimately,
Fred Kagan
we have
would like
that
to jump in on that.
I'd just like to make a point that has been lost in this discussion so far, which is, to begin with, there was a small al-Qaeda presence in Iraq before 2003. That's an established fact. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi was already in Baghdad in 2002. I do not regard that as sufficient justification for invading Iraq. I don't think that, I'm not trying to make that case. I am stating a fact that there was an al-Qaeda presence in Iraq before we invaded. Al-Qaeda then took advantage of our failed strategy and our inappropriate methods and the variety of the mistakes that have been highlighted here repeatedly to seize control in Anbar province and areas of Nineveh, and particularly Salah ad-Din province and areas of Diyala and, of course, Baghdad. What has been lost is that Iraq is now the first place in the Muslim world where a Sunni Arab population that had embraced and supported al-Qaeda and provided fighters to its ranks, rose up against al-Qaeda, joined with the military of the United States of America, fought tooth and nail to defeat the insurgents, threw them out of their country, and now you can hardly find an Iraqi anywhere who will say anything other than al-Qaeda are foreigners, they're evil, they're bad people, and we will never let them back into our country. If you want to talk about effects in the war on terror, this is an unintended consequence, let us say. It's not as though there was an al-Qaeda group in Iraq that was large that we went in and defeated. However, if you watch what the jihadis say, if you watch the al-Qaeda websites, nothing that has happened in the past 7 years has distressed them more, with the exception of losing Afghanistan initially. Nothing has distressed them more than the awakening movement in Iraq, which they see as a mortal threat to the success of their ideological movement within the Muslim world. And I think it's very important to recognize that.
I understand that we have an Iraqi war vet who's had his hand up for some time, far in the back. Sir, the mic is yours.
Thank you. My name is Jose Vasquez. I'm a former staff sergeant in the U.S. Army. I'm also a member. Thank you. I'm also a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War. My organization just recently published a series of testimonies called Winter Soldier, Iraq and Afghanistan Eyewitness Accounts of the Occupations. Over 150 members came forward to testify about things like indiscriminate fire into civilian occupied areas, ongoing torture, and corporate pillaging. My question for the folks that are for the motion is, given the systemic nature of these types of atrocities, do the panelists for the motion support a military victory at the price of moral and legal failure? Is that victory at all? Thank you.
The factual basis of atrocities which exist in all wars, as it pertains to Iraq, are far lower than any experience that the United States or Western countries have normally had in wars in the past. And I'm not suggesting they don't exist, they exist. The difference is this also, is that when the United States and its Western allies, when their soldiers do wrong and harm others, there's accountability for that. Those soldiers and those leaders that are involved in that are brought very quickly into a judicial process for accountability. That's what a democracy does, and that's what we have always been doing throughout our history. We're not perfect in this, but it's certainly, that is the realistic issue here, is the fact that they have been committed, but they are much lower than our experience has been on a per capita basis, and always there's been accountability for that horror when it's afflicted and when the chain of command is made aware of it. And it ignores the overwhelming good and sacrifice and compassion that we have seen our soldiers display on a day-to-day basis. On the one moment, putting their life right on the line for Iraqi families and Iraqi citizenry, and then in the next moment, having tremendous compassion in helping and assisting him.
General, with due respect to your passion on that and to the question itself, it's actually off our point of whether the U.S. is winning the war in Iraq, and I would like to get back to that point.